when I read your work, I can't help but feel almost like you are reverse engineering customer service excellence. And I'm curious. I know you described writing as your side gig, like your consulting practice is your main gig. So what drew you into wanting to like reverse engineer, write about it, and teach others this? What's the attraction for you?
So I was working in Seattle, Washington for a Pike Place fish market, a little seafood market there in the Pike Place area. And I'd been consulting for them. There had been some stories that had been shared out in the media and some books written about them. And I thought, well, I was working with Johnny. Why aren't we telling the story? So we told Johnny's story from Johnny's voice. And from there, having told his story, I was looking out over at Starbucks, and it was just a block away, the original Starbucks store. And I thought, well, I haven't really seen the story told about them other than the CEO, Howard Schultz, had his book, Pour Your Heart Into It. Yes. I thought, well, maybe I can get inside there and I can start looking around as an outsider. With a Ph.D. in organizational development, it made sense that I would analyze these things and then try to cull out the nuggets that we could all get access to.
And, that leads me to my next question is, your books are a who's who of Fortune 500 companies. And, you're like one dude. Like, how do you get, now actually, I know that recently you divulged that you were working with Godiva chocolates, which, by the way, I need to see Godiva in a book about, not necessarily about customer service, just I want to read about chocolate. So if you can put that on your to-do list, I'd appreciate it. But how do you get access? Like, because they pull back the curtains for you.
Well, early it wasn't easy. I mean, to be honest with you, it was kind of ridiculous. And I remember looking in the back of my Starbucks card for the 800 number for customer service. I called and I said, I want to do a book about you. And I shopped it around forever throughout their phone trees to try to get to somebody who could talk to me. And then I did talk to somebody who then vetted it to the senior leadership team. They had read the Pike Place Fish Market book and were influenced by the Pike Place Fish Market and some of the things they did. And before you know it, I was in. But once in there, it was a battle to get inside of the Ritz-Carlton, where they have lots and lots of gravitas and they don't want anybody messing with the brand. And then at some point, it just starts taking off, right? I mean, if somebody hasn't written these kind of books and they contact a brand, most of the time the brands are going to be very polite in their standard email. Fortunately, now the people that I used to write about at Starbucks have since gone to Google. And so will we do a book about Google, because I have many of the same people that I worked with there. It's a lovely problem right now that I have in my life, but it wasn't always so.
And so, that's we talk often leading with NICE, both internally in our company and with clients about, this starting. And there's a quote, I think it's from a cartoon. The first step at being great at something is sucking at it. And
really bad.
Yeah.
And that's about the second and the third and the 50th step as well, I think.
Well, I just love that you called the 1-800 number. Right? When I was doing auto journalism, my first car review I got because I called the GM 1-800 number and they put me through to like their media fleet operator. And that's how I got into doing car reviews back in the day. I don't do that any longer, but I love that approach.
I think it is a bit of courage and stupidity all together put, into that. You don't know that you shouldn't do it, or, you just kind of do it because it seems like the most logical thing to do. And you're fearless and willing to look stupid.
Fair enough. So if you are driving and listening to this podcast, I want to encourage you, I'm an Audible subscriber and I've both read and listened to Joseph's books. I'm going to talk about the Starbucks experience and leading the Starbucks way now. And if in this moment you're thinking, I want to check those out, definitely, if you're driving, Audible is a great way to listen to books. And Joseph typically narrates them himself as well. So you get a bit more of that, the heart and soul behind the parts that, require that level. But yeah, so speaking of those two books, so you wrote the Starbucks Experience in 2006. I was working at a college at the time, and I actually went out on eBay and I bought about 100 Green Apron books because I wanted to share it with my departments. Now, I don't think they actually do the Green Apron book anymore, or if they do, it's different or it's embedded in a different way. And they don't do the black aprons anymore. And then you went and wrote another book about leading the Starbucks way in 2013. So obviously, we don't expect Starbucks to stay the same over 7 years. But what led you to do that company twice?
Yeah, well, first off, the book was incredibly successful, and the brand has such cachet, and it's a global phenomena. So it was worthy of a revisit, I think. Clearly, things had changed badly for a period there, right after the kind of the downturn in the economy. Starbucks was seeing a real drop off in volume. Howard Schultz, who I'd worked with in the first book, had left the helm. He was the chief global strategist. He had to come back and take back over from Jim Donald, who was the CEO at the time. And it seemed like, here's a rebirth of a brand, relaunching and reinventing itself. And it was the right time for me to try to capture what that looks like.
And what were there looking back at, and we're like now 8-9 years removed from that, is there anything that surprised you revisiting Starbucks those years later that still stick in your mind?
Yeah, I think that leaders had the capacity to recreate the brand, because if you look at it, other than Michael Dell did it really pretty well at one point in the history of Dell, lots of times the people who start up great brands are not the people to turn it back around somewhere down the road, because it's not just the same formula over again. In the case of Starbucks, it was a lot about digitalizing the connection. It was about realizing that it wasn't the third place anymore. It was about creating inspiring experiences wherever customers were, and I think that was a wonderful ability to see leaders really take a pause and say, what got us here won't get us there, to kind of take a phrase from a great book title.
I was going to say, I think I read that book as well. I forget who wrote it though. Oh man. Yeah. What? Oh, and now it's on my bookcase behind me. I'll go check it out again. Yeah. And if you're in a bookstore, the cover has like a ladder that's disconnected. So if you're looking for that book, check it out.
And I know the writer, and I'm blocking right now. So
yeah,
hopefully he's blocked me out a few times too. I won't feel as bad.
This is Joseph. There will be a test at the end of this podcast. So,
good, thank you.
So one of the things I found absolutely fascinating is, again, the new gold standard was I shared that far and wide with my friends, my colleagues, etc. And I'm going to blank now. Hans, I think his name was, the CEO for the Ritz-Carlton.
Horst Schulze, yeah.
That
one I got.
Yeah.
The test, I got 1 out of 2. I don't think I'm passing, but thanks for.
Yeah, we do have a 60% pass fail on the Leading with Nice interviews here at the podcast. I saw him on the leadership speaker series lots. He had lots of great things to say. And then we see the evolution of the hotel industry. And I wonder, was the Airbnb way kind of like an unofficial connection in the same way you had the Starbucks? Or was that just unintentional and happened to be a nice thing?
No. It was very intentional. And quite frankly, in 2008, I think is about when I was writing the new gold standard, just to date us all again. And I was sitting with the CEO, and we were debating issues like, can we serve a beer in a bottle at a Ritz-Carlton, or must it always be elegantly presented in a glass?
Yeah.
And we were having these debates about the customer experience and relevance in 2008. Well, we were doing that. There were 2 guys in San Francisco who got some air mattresses and a bunch of Pop-Tarts and created the air bed and breakfast with the Pop-Tarts and the air mattresses, and they were subletting out their place in San Francisco. Fast forward 10 years, 15 years later, and suddenly the net worth of a brand that owns nothing is greater than the net worth of the entire Marriott family, which absorbed Ritz-Carlton. So I think it was time to tell a story of an evolving travel world and what it takes to be relevant. And some of that had to do with the subletting of properties and the gig economy. But a lot of it, I think, had to do with how do we create some warmth in a hospitality experience, something local, something quirky, as opposed to something that was, just the same everywhere. And I woke up in another Marriott and didn't know what city I was in, and it looked a lot like the Marriott I was in the night before. So I think there was something about that I wanted to tell. And I really enjoyed working on that book because Chip Conley was kind enough to take some time with me, and he had been a big consultant in the Airbnb space, and Chip has written some fabulous books himself, like Peak. So anyway, it just was a wonderful journey, and it was time to tell a different side of hospitality.
Dude, I want to be in your book club because we all read the same books. I love it. So I was in Phoenix in 2020, January, just before the start of COVID. I think I came home to basically Toronto starting to lock down. And I only mentioned that for the timeline. The Airbnb I stayed in was the front part of this like widowed elderly lady's house. And, I showed up and there's like bagels and butter in the fridge for me, which I didn't ask for. She just said, I thought you might appreciate this. And on the last day, she wrote me a thank you card and she gave me a bookmark with pressed flowers from her garden. And I was like, what? Like, first of all, I haven't seen a pressed flower bookmark in like 30 years. So that was crazy. But I was like, this is what I expect from Airbnb. And I want to juxtapose that against Toronto. During COVID, whole condos were empty because they were pretty much 90% Airbnb properties. And there's no question out of this, just more thoughts on like maybe some trends you might be seeing, because Airbnb, when you wrote that book, probably had a certain thing more often.
Yeah, that was the worst timing I think I could have ever written a book. It released at the end of 2019. How great Airbnb was. Now nobody can actually stay anywhere or travel anywhere. It was not a good scene. But we did, just for a quick aside, in Stronger Through Adversity, which was my last book, I did talk with the folks at Airbnb, and I did a nice, I think, juxtaposition of how Airbnb tried to handle being in the middle of the transaction between the buyer and the seller versus how Ticketmaster, StubHub, I think, tried to do it. Yeah. And I think what you saw really was a lot of brands struggling to figure out what was right for consumers in the context of the pandemic. And when you are the platform in a marketplace, how do you treat both the buyers and sellers with some dignity so refunds were handled and processed appropriately? Yeah, it was a terrible, terrible time to write a book about Airbnb. And by the way, Marshall Goldsmith is the author of the book, What Got You There? What got you here won't get you there, just for the record.
Yeah. And again, definitely check it out. There's like so many great lessons to be learned, even in 2022. So let's just talk a bit more. Like, I know that you, as I said earlier, your evening gig is writing books. You consult and you do keynote speaking. So what are you seeing? And I'm going to talk about Stronger Through Adversity in a moment, but what other trends are you seeing in your work that I think are blanket enough, could apply to somebody who owns like a small flower shop versus somebody who's leading a department at a software company?
Yeah. So, I hop a plane tomorrow and spend time, stand on a stage with 2,000 people out there in the audience. And it's a group of dentists, and we'll be talking about kind of the new realities around consumer perceptions of security and safety. They've always been there in the consumer mind space, but they've always been in the recesses. They're now more pronounced. Will they stay? We're seeing, obviously, the trend toward convenience. Make it easier for me. If I were running a dry cleaner or a flower shop or whatever it might be, I would be thinking about how do I make this easier for my consumer each and every single day? What can I do to automate as many touch points as possible for people who want to opt to convenience of automation? How do I make sure that I have people available who are warm, loving, and extremely knowledgeable when either the technology fails or in cases where people opt human? Those are just some of the trends that I think we're seeing with great frequency. The days of cash are probably gone, and digital pay and QR codes will forever be part of our landscape.
QR code's the greatest comeback. That's the greatest comeback.
Zappos Experience, we put QR codes throughout the book because the company's really a quirky company, and we wanted to show a lot of the videos. And when you actually had to open a QR app in order to use them, the utilization was nothing. Now the technology makes it super, super easy.
It's amazing. Also, I think you've coined like opt human.
I love that phrase. I love to opt human. I love the idea that we are technology powered and human powered and technology aided. That's it. We really are. We should try to drive experiences that are uniquely human but are aided by the magic of technology.
Do you find it hard to like walk around a mall and be a consumer and just knowing what you know in your expertise? Like, is that difficult for you?
Yeah, there's two things I don't do well. I don't watch other speakers on stage very well because I'm always watching the stagecraft, and I seldom really get the message. So I'm kind of really bad at that. And then in customer experience worlds, sometimes I delight so much in it, and other times I just anguish that people don't get an idea that every moment in their life they have the opportunity to give something powerful and get something back for it. But they're so self-absorbed and so annoyed and so crispy that they fail to see the magic of the moment.
So let's talk about one you've experienced recently. Like, what did you want to?
In terms, I always talk about the positives. I
Yes, of course.
never
Yeah.
talk
I
about
would
the
like that.
negatives. I figure there's enough people out there
Right.
who do the autopsies on why things go bad. For me, just a very simple moment. It was at a big box store. So again, not the place you would think of. And there was this little kid who was kind of looking at something, and this team member came up to them and said, tell me a little bit about what you're imagining with that. It was just about asking this child to not tell, want to buy it. There was no sales pitch to it. It was just like, tell me what you're imagining as you look at that. And it was, it's a lot of what the Lego store was trying to do. Some of their technology allows you to see actually the things in the boxes put together in 3-dimensional, some of the technology interfaces. But it was just trying to activate her, her imaginary world so that she could dream something, right? I don't know. To me, that touched me.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about. I have a friend who was a Lego store employee, and he didn't need to work. He actually had written software that was purchased by a large company, and he was made for life, but led a very humble existence. And he loved Lego, so he went and worked in Lego, and he went and worked there at the store because the manager told him his job is to make people love Lego. And he didn't have He personally did not have sales target numbers, and so it really just allowed him to talk to the kid, the parent, whoever. I just thought that was a really great approach. It's a paradigm more than anything.
Yeah, and I think that the whole notion is that engage people, right, in their dreams and in their family and their occupation and their recreational interests. Have a relationship based on things that are important to the other person. At least start one. And I saw that happening, sparked by that little bit of a moment.
Very cool. Okay. All right. Well, I want to ask you now, of course, about your newest book, Stronger Through Adversity. And you interviewed, I think the number was 141 or somewhere up there. And you wanted to understand how they navigated challenges brought on by the pandemic. And what I really appreciated about this book was that you read, I could go on HBR or LinkedIn and read a billion articles by one person and their opinion on how to navigate the pandemic. And I worked for somebody at one time who would tell me the plural of anecdote is not evidence. And so I just keep that front of mind that I can read your one experience, but does not mean this is the way forward. So you talked to all these people. Was there anything you learned? I mean, okay, yes, I know there are things you learned, but what did you learn about successful leadership through writing your previous books that gave you a sense of how leaders could navigate successfully? Like, obviously, you would have had a sense that I'm going to ask these leaders this question, and hopefully they can give me good answers. So what was it that gave you that sense?
Yeah, so I think when I did this, just the etiology of the book is relevant. I was trying to help brands who were in immediate crisis figure out how are we going to take care of our customers given that everything was uncertain. And as I was in those task forces with all these executives and all these companies that I work with, I was realizing the leadership was so varied. Like some people were very dogmatic and directive and very confident, and others were constantly resetting the clock every 24 hours and trying to figure out what was real. And all I knew is that no one knew what they were doing. None of us had been through this kind of thing before. And so I just started asking. And my background is as a clinical psychologist by training. And so it was not unusual for me to ask a lot of questions. And they seemed to really want to talk. And I think what I really enjoyed was how vulnerable people were in this crisis. Not that I would want this crisis on anyone, but that they were becoming increasingly transparent. They were becoming more of that Brene Brown, complete, vulnerable, authentic leader. And I got some really wonderful insights about how people were approaching the chaos that I didn't used to get in most of the work that I had done. People just had a little bit too much fear that the shareholders would find out that there was a chink in the armor. So no, this was a lovely, lovely time to see people more vulnerable. And it was attractive to their team members. We saw really high levels of employee engagement for the most vulnerable and transparent of leaders.
So you how do you first get interested in what is I'd be curious, what is it that got you interested in this line of thinking, asking questions, applying that knowledge and helping others? Like, where was it nurtured nature? What you?
Oh, it was definitely nurtured by my parents, right? So my mom, every time we'd go to someone's house, it seems like she would just ask them a million questions. And I remember as a kid saying, "Mom, why are you so nosy?" Right? And my mom, in classic style, sat down and said, "Well, you could think about it as nosy, or you could think about it as interested." And she goes, "I'm not particularly interesting, except for the level to which I'm interested." And I think the rest of my life has been that. I mean, look at this show. You're interesting to your listeners because you take such a deep interest in people, this authentic, nice interest in people, right? And I think that just causes people to say, wow, I want more of that, right? We crave people who take an interest. And I think my mama taught me that pretty well. And throughout my life, it's gotten me out of a lot of trouble because the more questions I ask, the less likely I'm going to say something extremely stupid.
Yeah, no, there's since I've enjoyed quoting authors with you, I'll quote another one. Molly Fletcher, who was a sports agent in Atlanta and now has a consulting company, says, curiosity is the essence of a hungry leader. Trade defensiveness for curiosity. And I think that is the great words to live by. So you have, I want to give you a chance to speak about the Michelli Experience that I think is newer to what you're doing and part of your offerings. Can you tell us a little bit about what this is? And like people that listen to this podcast are typically, executive directors of nonprofits, sales folks, business leaders. We have some educators, some faith-based leaders as well. So just to understand who might be listening to you right now.
Sure. So I think we're evolving, like hopefully everyone else is. A lot of what we do is consulting. So we go into companies and we try to help them elevate their service levels. We've certainly done that in churches and helping them create experiential offerings, that are really embracing and welcoming and create belonging, as an example in the faith-based arena. But beyond consulting, we do plenty of keynotes where we'll talk about authentic leadership or servant leadership and how service serves us, how serving others enables us to fulfill our mission and empowers us to do more. I think in transition, we're doing more board positions and looking at areas that are particularly close to my heart. I'm currently about to step onto a board now that's all about digital wellness and helping kids. You're not going to avoid the internet. These devices are extremely addictive. The question is, how do we create digital fitness? So that's a part of what we're looking at now from a social perspective, maybe helping some kids who are otherwise in trouble based on their online behavior. So, I think it's a mixed bag of things. And as I get older and I think less about money and think more about significance, I think we're getting into more and more things where we believe we can have a greater impact.
Yeah, just for context around Leading with Nice, that's the name of our agency as well, not just a podcast. And we in 2018, the company I did mostly comms work. I called it Coleraine Communications. My wife was born in this Northern Ireland town called Coleraine. And a mentor of mine said, Matthew, I love the name that you honor your wife through your business, but like really you just preach like gratitude and empathy and trust and generosity and service. Like you always talk about leading with nice. And so that's why we called the company that in 2018. And I remember thinking, who wants a company? Like, I know people believe in this, but who wants to work with a company? But now, man, like what you're talking about, I can't get over how many people are drawn to us because they want more of that, like the empathetic leader through COVID. It's just those people have risen to the top. So,
yeah, well, I had a flirtation with, and we had the website for a while, and we still, I think, have the URL of Surprisingly Kind, and I was just wanting to, get stories of it. And my thinking behind it was, I didn't want random acts of kindness, right? Like to me, I wanted it to be intentional. And I didn't want it to be kindness that was just expected, like because my boss was nice to, because they're my boss, I'll be kind, intentionally kind, but I wanted to be surprisingly kind, right? Like doing the extra things of kindness, that 1+ kindness. So we definitely try to get kind stories and ran that for a while. It just was a whole separate business enterprise. I figure I'll reliven it when I fully retire. But I love this whole mindset of
Mm-hmm.
goodness, kindness. The world just needs it. I mean, we are craving and in pain with all the ugly and evil, and it gets the headlines. And I just hope more and more kindness is the force that we embrace, because it does change the world.
Okay, last question. I want you to speak to this employer right now. I heard a story this week of friends of a friend who had to make sure their mouse moved every 5 minutes to for their employer's satisfaction, and they're of course looking for a new job. What is your message to that people of not employers of that mindset right now?
Yeah, it was a good old days mindset. It's a management philosophy of Taylorism. Where you put people in a box and you manage them in the box, and you watch for performance in the box. And it's cubicle culture, and there's been so many variations of I got to see you in order to know if you're performing or not. Let's manage performance. Let's not manage physical space. Let's not manage mouse clicks. You've lost yourself in all of that. Let's manage impact and the key performance indicators that suggest we're having impact. And if you don't, in the great reset that people have, often called the great resignation, it's not only their mouse need to move, their mouse is going to move to another employer. I mean, that's where their mouse is going to go. It's understandable. It's just kind of old school thinking.